Welcome to the Royals Rundown Podcast, the premier Kansas City Royals podcast, finally back on Apple Podcast, presented by Royals Review. I am Jacob Milham, joined as always by Jeremy Greco. Jeremy, happy 2024, man. We made it to a new calendar.
Yeah, I did wonder what apocalypse awaits us this year.
Well, if things in the Pacific are any sign, it's going to be a doozy of a year, unfortunately.
Yay.
Yeah, it's already been interesting for Japan, so sorry for all my friends over there. I'm only following it closely because I know
I missed it. What's happening? I'm still in Georgia, so I am not connected to the rest of the world. What is happening in Japan?
It was like New Year's Day. Wee hours of the morning. They had a 7.4 magnitude earthquake near Japan, and then they had a tsunami warning shortly afterwards.
Well, yeah.
So that's thankfully, as far as I can tell, there's not devastating damage. There is still quite a bit of damage that comes with an earthquake. So just been keeping tabs on that, man, because it can be pretty bad.
Yeah.
But hey, we're here to talk about the Kansas City Royals after all. But first, if you want to keep updated on the team as best as possible, you got to go check out Royals Review. You can find them on Facebook, on X, and plus at royalsreview.com. Got a great team over there covering everything from prospects to history to, just present day normal baseball stuff. That stuff's on there too.
No matter how good the Royals are, the Royals Review team is always top notch.
Hey, I like it. Well, like I said during the intro, we are finally back on Apple Podcasts, so welcome back to our Apple Podcast listeners. It was a doozy, but that was a great way to start off the new year, getting the news that we were back up and running on Apple Podcasts. But our favorite platform for you to listen to us on is Spotify, because you can check out our polls and Q&As on Spotify. And each week we give you a chance to answer our question, and we will read your responses on air. So last week we asked you, the listener, what would you like to ask our exciting guest next week? And a little bit more on that in a moment from Jeremy. But our own Preston Farr responded to the Q&A.
Nice.
He said, been meaning to ask him, but haven't yet. I'm curious how Zips ranks the bullpen after the additions. Pre-additions, it projected them to have a negative 0.1 FWAR. And Jeremy, I know that was a big stick.
That's my number one question that I'm ready to ask him. I'm right there with Preston.
Yeah, we are so excited to have our guest on next week, and let's hear a little bit more from Jeremy about him.
Yeah, so hopefully future friend of the podcast, Dan Zimborski, founder, creator of Zips. He writes over at Fangraphs, just tons of terrific content. If you follow him on Twitter, you know that he provides all kinds of entertainment beyond baseball, beyond the box score, beyond having, the amazing projection system that is Zips. He also loves to give people some Hearthstone cards. If you're familiar with the game Hearthstone, he'll turn baseball players into Hearthstone cards, which is always a good time. He's also, in times past, used the create a wrestler feature of wrestling games. I think it's WWE wrestling games to create baseball players to just duke it out with each other. So, he's got all kinds of great content going over there. So he's definitely an excellent and then, he's also got the baseball analysis stuff.
Yeah.
Which is just also terrific. So give him a follow on Twitter. And very excited to have him on the podcast next week and ask him lots of important questions about his Zips projections, including, did the Royals get out of the negative position group WAR dungeon, which is he wrote in his article when he put out the Royals Zips, he wrote he doesn't remember the last time that happened. And I got to tell you, that is a difficult thing to do.
Yeah.
To have a position group that as a whole is so bad that it's below replacement level. So it's a good thing the Royals made some moves there, and the bullpen should be much improved versus what those projections suggested next season.
Yeah, but I can't wait to chat more with Dan next week about that. That episode will come to you next Thursday morning. You can find us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever you get your podcasts from. We will be having a bonus episode next week. I do want
Woo.
to say that we will be sitting down with Preston Farr himself, talk about his the team that he is assembling over at Farm to Fountains, to talk about more of the Kansas City Royals prospects and stuff. Plus, there are a couple of prospects that are just coming out of nowhere that we need to get his insight on. So looking forward to that, and check that out next week. Going to be a big week. This is spring training is kind of right around the corner. It seems like baseball has been gone for a long time, because it has, but we're seeing more workout videos. We're seeing more, it just seems like ball players are getting ready for the trips down to Arizona and Florida in the coming weeks. So we got to do the same here, Jeremy, right? We got
Yeah,
to get back in the
absolutely.
swing.
Time to start getting warmed up.
I know, right? And I got my throwing program. Do you have anything you're
What,
working on?
are you throwing your voice? What are you doing here?
Yes.
All
I'm
right,
fuck
ventriloquism, always a good time. Doesn't
well,
really
that's why
translate in podcasts, I'm
no,
afraid.
no, not at all. For people who've never seen me, I'm just a doll, actually, on the
Exactly. You're
podcast.
my doll, and it turns out that you were my puppet the whole time.
Oh my gosh, Jeremy. Hey, listen, some of our more jaded listeners would agree with you on that, I will say.
I don't even know what that would mean.
Oh my goodness. Well, hey, before we get too far off the tracks, there are a couple of things that we do need to talk about regarding the Kansas City Royals. So, first things first, Kansas City Mayor Quentin Lucas did come out and give us a sort of, kind of, I guess, update on the stadium debacle. He said, quote, final deals and arrangements, end quote, could come in the days ahead. We knew that if they wanted to get this on the ballot by April, yes, yeah, I
Update,
agree with
no
you.
update.
Yeah, we have an update that really isn't an update. There's a full long interview on NPR in Kansas City,
And
KCUR 89.3. Sorry,
we've
go
already
ahead.
missed the deadline for them to put that ballot measure in April, right?
I don't think so.
I thought it was in December.
The Jackson County legislature must decide before January 23rd if it
Oh,
will advance a ballot measure that would renew the team's 3/8 cent sales tax for 40 years. Then voters would decide whether or not to approve the stadium sales tax in April.
I just,
So
the thing here, I'm sorry to just completely
you're good.
derail you, but the
Good.
thing that I don't understand is the county kind of made it pretty clear. Not just Frank White, a couple other legislators were like, "Yeah, I'm not sure about this whole 3/8 cents tax thing, y'all." Because for one thing, that tax money is earmarked only for the stadiums. Now, maybe if they update it, they'll do it in a different way. But they were pretty clear that like this may not be the way forward, and it's not a popular method for procuring stadium funding anymore. They use ticket taxes now, which the Royals are against. So if they're against this, if the county is against this, then what are the Royals offering them that make them change their mind? Because if the only thing they're doing is saying, well, maybe we won't stay in Jackson County, I don't think that's worth it. Like, they don't really want to go to Clay County. They don't really want to go anywhere else. They want to be in Jackson County. I hope the county is playing hardball with it, but the Royals are going to come back and be like, fine, get the money some other way. We'll deal.
Yeah, hopefully so. I will say this, Jeremy. There's been so many gray area updates regarding the stadium situation that I haven't been able to invest in it myself. This has been going on for years at this point. We
Almost
are
2
in
years now, right?
2024. Yeah. Yeah. It is, if I recall correctly, I want to say it was in 2021 where Sherman announced that they were
More than
intending.
2 years, yeah.
Yeah. So it's crazy to me that this has been going on for so long and there
And,
really hasn't happened.
yeah, and like stadiums take a while to build,
They do.
but it doesn't
They do.
usually take 2 years from, hey, we want a new stadium to breaking ground. The Athletics, I think, are an outlier
Yeah, they're an
in that
exception to
way.
the rule.
Yeah, an exception to the rule. So it's a very odd process, and it's one of the
It is.
reasons both the county and the team have come under great criticism. Though I think the
Mhm.
criticism of the team is more justified than the criticism of the county. There's certainly questions about how the county has conducted itself as well.
Agreed. Agreed. And I think that in 5 or 6 years' time, this is going to be a great saga to look back on once we have all the details and stuff. Right now, I'm just reading stuff off as they come
Yeah,
in.
maybe
So,
we'll get a nice expose in the Athletic from Andy McCullough and the guy who came after him, who's now
and Rustin Dodd,
Justin
and
Dodd. That's him. That's the guy I was
yeah.
thinking of. They'll come out and give us a nice breakdown of like, this is what happened. I'd love like an oral history treatment from
Oh,
them or
yeah.
something.
For sure, I agree. That would be the best way to digest this whole situation. So, if you want to read or listen to that interview from Quentin Lucas, it will be linked down in the podcast description below. Again, that's on the NPR station there in Kansas City. The only other Royals news to come out it was a holiday weekend again. Things are a little slow right now. That's okay. The only other update to come out was that Max Castillo was claimed on waivers by the Boston Red Sox. So the right-handed pitcher was designated for assignment. He was the correlating move with Hunter Renfroe, if I do recall correctly. The Venezuelan native was half of the Royals' return for Whit Merrifield with the Toronto Blue Jays trade back in 2022. The other half, Samad Taylor, did not have an immaculate 2023 season either, so it's kind of a toss-up if the Royals have lost or won that trade. I will say Castillo, he's still 24 years old, still has plenty of team control. He just was not, even on Royal standards, he was not getting it done in the bullpen, and he was not going to stick as a starter. The ground ball to fly ball ratio was not going to work in Kauffman Stadium either. So the Boston Red Sox picked him up, see what he does there. But happy trails to Max Castillo. So, Jeremy, let's go ahead and hop right into it. So, it's been fun over the holidays to see like the little trends that pop out on baseball social media. I want to say our friend Preston Farr, obviously enough, brought one to Royals Twitter or Royals X, excuse me, and he was talking about like breakout players and players that are going to lag behind or regress and players that are just going to meet expectations. So I wanted to discuss some of the breakout players that we are projecting to be in a Kansas City Royals uniform. And in light of our guest next week, we'll run down their Zips projections also, and we'll just say why we think they will outperform expectations. Sounds good?
Sounds like something at least.
Sounds like something? All right. Well, hey, I'll take it there. So, Jeremy, why don't you go ahead and kick us off, man? Who is your breakout player pick?
So I know this is probably going to surprise a lot of people, but I'm going to go ahead and pick
It's Cole Riggins, isn't it?
Mr. Chris Bubich.
Whoa. Okay. Okay.
So he's actually projected at a fairly nice 105.3 innings pitched, with
Okay.
a 0.9 FWAR next year, and 4.64 ERA. So back end rotation guy. I think he
Mm-hmm.
could be a little bit better than that. One projection I have a little bit of an issue with there is he's projected to walk 3.8 batters per nine. I think he's going to be able to pitch better than that.
Okay.
Um, so I think that will bring those numbers down a little bit, and I think we can hopefully expect to see some more from him there. I
Yeah.
did have another guy I was looking at. Do you want me to bring him up, or you want to take
Yeah.
turns
Might,
here?
might, might as well, man. Might as well.
All right. So the other guy I was looking at is actually, believe it or not, my second favorite, Cole Reagans. So
I knew
according to
it.
this, he is projected for 1.6 FWAR, which would lead all of the Royals pitchers next year. But that's the same amount as Brady Singer. And you
Mm.
go, what on earth happened there? And the answer is that Brady Singer is projected to pitch 143 innings, while Cole Reagans is only projected to pitch 111 and a third innings.
Dang.
So I think that really Cole Reagan's probably going to pitch more innings than that. So I think he could easily get close to that 3 WAR. I think he's projected for 3.6 walks per 9, which I think is a little bit high for him. So I really think that the rotation could be even better than it's necessarily projected to be between Reagans and Bubich. I think will both pitch a little bit better next year than it thinks.
Okay. I do want to point out, haven't heard a whole lot about Chris Bubich this offseason.
Mm-hmm.
I'm hoping that the recovery is going well for him. Obviously, there was a nice little video breaking down Cole Reagan's ascent from his like low 90s fastball to his high 90s fastball in a Royals uniform. I think I saw that because you shared it, Jeremy.
Yeah. So it was kind of talking about like some of the stuff that we really kind of seen last year. Like there was a breakdown in the Athletic from Eno Saris late last year talking
Oh, that's
about
right.
how he worked with Tread and the kinds of things he did. And the big takeaway was that the exercises that Tread and really not just Tread, but I think you would see also at places that you don't care for that they're really try to really narrow down the pitcher and do kind of unique exercises for them because if you're just giving them what Tread argues is that if you're just giving them a generic mobility exercise, they made it to the major leagues. Generic mobility exercises aren't going to get them anywhere anymore. They're already doing that. So if they're going to get an edge, it's going to have to be a program that's tailored specifically for them. And the further we get, I think the more we realize scientifically that humans are so vastly different from each other on an individual level when it comes to physical stuff. I think we kind of already knew that because, like, obviously, Mike Trout and Shohei Ohtani are freaks of nature. Like, no one can play like they do, right? And if human bodies were kind of more similar, I think we would see more people playing like they do. But they're not. So really individually tailoring those exercises, and the key comes in are you actually good at tailoring those exercises? Tread and Cole Reagans certainly seem to think they've certainly found something there. You're on mute, Mr. Jacob.
Thank you very much, Jeremy. I do appreciate that. Sorry that the dogs are playing in the background. It's hard to disagree with what Tread has done with Cole Reagans. I know just a few months ago we were talking about, hey, we're excited to see what they can do with guys like Colin Snyder and Dylan Coleman and Jonathan Heasley, but not so much anymore, as all those pitchers are now gone from the franchise. Let's see. Thank you for your two. I guess I'm going to go on the batting side of things then.
All
And
right.
the first player that I thought of was Dairon Blanco. He kind of
Interesting.
had a sneaky good season last year. What'd you say?
Yeah.
It was, listen, he only played in 69 games, but he still had a 1.1 FWAR. He had a 108 weighted runs created plus. So, especially looking at the Royals lineup, that production across the entire season was pretty good and definitely palatable, considering that he also has elite speed and a pretty solid glove and outfield as well. His Zips projections are actually very, very bullish, I will say. Projecting, let's see, a 97 OPS plus, so just underneath league average in OPS. He a positive person on the base paths, defensively, projecting out a 1.5 FWAR season from him. And he had an interesting comp here in Dan's article. Dairon Blanco had a hit comp of Kevin Kiermaier, who just signed a 1-year deal with the Toronto Blue Jays, and I think that's a fairly good comp for what you're getting in the player, but also one that I'm comfortable seeing in Kauffman Stadium, because we
Yeah.
always thought that Kyle Isbell would kind of be that at some point, and it just hasn't happened. Unfortunately, the bat has to take some more steps forward, and I just don't know if it will in 2024. So I'm very bullish on Blanco. He had some above average BABIP so maybe got a little bit lucky, but it
But
wasn't to the point
when you've
of
got
where,
speed above average, BABIP is occasionally a thing.
yeah, that's true because he's out there legging out singles. Give me a second, Jeremy.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'll just go ahead and expand on that BABIP point a little bit. One thing that I think can be a mistake with BABIP, and it's a mistake I've made on more than one occasion, is to just say, "Oh, well, it's an above-average BABIP, so obviously that's going to come back down." And I don't think that that's necessarily a thing that makes a lot of sense because some players hit the ball hard, some players run really fast, some players do both, and so they're
Mm-hmm.
going to naturally have higher BABIPs. Uh,
Yeah.
I think what the better comparison is probably to compare BABIP to career BABIP,
Okay.
and to similar batting profile players. So we'd have to dig a little bit deeper, but I don't remember what his BABIP was last year.
His BABIP last year was .330, so it
Yeah,
wasn't even
it's
that
not
crazy
unreasonable. We're
high.
not talking like a 400. Like if you get to like a
Yeah.
400 BABIP or something, you're like, okay, yeah, that's not going to stay that high. I think Nicky Lopez in his really good season had like a 360 something BABIP. So yeah,
Yeah.
probably wasn't smart to think that that was going to stay that high. Which unfortunately
Mm-hmm.
I did. I was bullish on him. I think I used that term right.
Damn.
Um,
You did. You did.
yeah, so that's just one kind of caveat I want to throw out there about that BABIP. It could come down a little bit, but I'm not going to say, well, oh, he's obviously going to lose 30 points of batting average because it's got to come down.
Yeah. Fair enough. Fair enough. Also, I am more, I'm going to use bullish again. I am more bullish on Nelson Velasquez than
Okay.
what Zips projects him out to be. Zips projects him to be a .5 FWAR player
Oh
across
yeah.
499 plate appearances, which I understand a good portion of that is probably his defense dragging down that FWAR, but even his batting numbers are not that great. Zips projects him to have like a 301 on base percentage, a 426 slugging, coming out to a 98 OPS plus. So this
That
guy that's no go
that
for it.
189 ISO would be a huge disappointment
Yeah,
after last
absolutely.
year. I think he had an ISO close to 300, which okay,
Exactly.
maybe he's not going to have that again, but one below 200 also seems like, come on, y'all.
Yeah. And so we're here talking about BABIP, and a lot of my optimism regarding Nelson's performance in 2024 is tied to it. I will say he had all that production last year, and I'm looking at. Let me look at this because I want to make sure that I'm looking at just his Royals numbers, not his Chicago numbers, because he had some gaudy games with Chicago. So 40
Mhm.
games, 14 home runs for the Royals with 28 RBI. Cool. Struck out a ton. That's okay. But he did what he did for a 130 weighted runs created plus on a 221 BABIP. That is way below league average.
Yeah.
Way, 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 way below league average.
And
And,
that ISO 352,
yeah,
like the projection says his ISO is going to be almost half what it was last year.
exactly.
That doesn't stack up for me at all.
No, it doesn't stack up for me either. And I'm not, frankly, I might be silly going against Zips because usually Zips is close, at least to the projections. Maybe I'm not seeing something with Nelson, but I think he's going to far outperform those Zips projections. And I would love to get Dan's thoughts next week on
Yeah.
why he's expecting that regression of sorts. Because even in 40 games last year, he had a .7 FWAR with the Royals. Like, so he's projecting that not only is Velasquez going to take a step back, but a massive step back. So I'm not too certain about that one, Jeremy. What do you think?
Yeah, so one interesting thing that he's included in this article is the 20th percentile
Oh
projections and the
yeah,
80th percentile projections. So like 20th percentile is like worst reasonable case, and 80th percentile is best reasonable case.
mm-hmm.
Um, so like you're probably still not going to get to either of those, but he Velasquez has a lot of volatility here, going from negative 0.9 FWAR to 1.8 FWAR in those
Whew,
projections.
damn.
So like y- y- that's a lot.
Yeah,
Zips, I think in this case, just doesn't necessarily have a lot to go on, and so
that's true.
it's kind of projecting him a little bit conservatively. There's also, I mean, there's reasons that the Cubs traded him for a mediocre reliever. They weren't convinced he was the real deal, and we've seen before how a second half power surge can just absolutely vanish for 3, 4, 5 years following
Yeah.
your first real playing time. But I have a better feeling about Nelson Velasquez than I did Ryan O'Hearn. Um, I don't know why. I don't have anything to justify that with, but I think you're right that he'll probably be above. I think those projections that we see for those numbers are kind of the 50th percentile projections. So I
Hmm.
think we'll see something above that.
Yeah, I think so. I think I'm honestly expecting the 80th percentile in those projections from him. Maybe a little bit more realistic would be in the 70th percentile though. But like I said, we'll talk to Dan a little bit more about it next week. Those are just a couple of players that we are optimistic about heading into the 2024 season. If you want to hear more of our analysis or just more thoughts regarding the Royals, go check out royalsreview.com for articles, podcasts, and much, much more over
I'm
there.
just, I want to throw one more thing at you about
Yes.
these projections.
Hmm.
Excuse me, Nelson Velasquez's projected ISO for his 80th percentile works
Yes.
out to 226
Man.
after a 352 last year. So
Huh.
in the best case, um, it still sees him losing a lot of that power. However,
Yeah, it does.
even losing a lot of that power, there's room for him to excel.
Hmm.
So I think it's smart to look at him and think, yeah, that's a guy who could be much better than those basic Zips projections.
Yeah, and I can't wait to see how things play out once the rubber hits the road. I'm curious if maybe the strikeouts are weighing very heavily on his Zips projections because they certainly wasn't great last year, 29.3% strikeout rate, but the walks were solid. I mean, he walked at a 7.5% rate, so I don't know. This is where we need Dan just to press him a little bit on his projections and say, hey, why is the system saying this about this player when we saw the opposite last year? Oh man, oh man, oh man, Jeremy. Like I said earlier, it's been a pretty quiet week for all things regarding the Royals. Um, but that wasn't the case just a few weeks ago. The Royals are still or still have been one of the most active teams in free agency. They're tied with the Cincinnati Reds for the most overall signings in free agency with 6, and I want to say that they placed 6th in overall money spent in free agency. So that hasn't been the case a lot regarding these Kansas City Royals in recent years. So I'm just happy to see that. But just like a fan, I want more. Give me
Yeah.
more. I want to hear the hot stove keep going. But I want to get your thoughts. Do you think the Royals are done adding via free agency? Do you feel that?
Yeah, I think it's kind of telling like how they were listed as suitors for just about everybody there for a little while, and their name hasn't really come up since then. And JJ Piccolo kind of signaled he's like, yeah, we're this is kind of what we wanted to accomplish, and we've accomplished it. The thing that's interesting to me is that the Royals are still sixth in overall spending. Now they were third at one point, so they've come down a little bit, and they probably will come down a little bit more. But the off season's half over. Spring training is right around the corner,
Mm-hmm.
and I projected this couple month ago, 2 months ago, that
I
we
think
might
2 months ago.
see a decline in free agent spending because of the rising interest rates,
Yeah.
um,
Mm-hmm.
and the way that impacts how big businesses do business.
Yep.
And so I think, and I said, some teams, some smaller teams, might be really smart to go out and spend some money, just a little bit of money, and try to steal some wins while all the big clubs like the Padres are just shedding payroll like crazy. The Yankees went and got a trade guy instead of signing anyone new necessarily. The Dodgers, of course, went nuts, but the Mets are
Yeah.
shedding payroll or not adding payroll. So I think that, and we've seen it in the division. The Twins lost their top two starters, or at least two of their top three, and
Hmm.
and they haven't replaced them at all. And nobody's spending here either. So I think a really crafty team, and this is what I said at the time, was that a really crafty team could go in and spend a little bit of money and maybe steal some wins, make a playoff spot, and get some of that sweet, sweet playoff money, playoff TV money, playoff
Yeah.
ticket sales, playoff merch sales. They're a real thing.
Yep.
So I think maybe that's what the Royals have done here a little bit. I know some people are saying, "Oh, well, they're doing that to convince people to vote yes for the new stadium." If that's what they're doing, then they are betting that fans are extremely short-sighted, which
Hmm.
maybe that's a good bet. I don't know. Um, but I think that there's a real possibility that they looked around and said, nobody else is going to be spending money right now because of those rising interest rates. Let's see if we can steal, and the Central Division sucks. So let's see if we can steal a division crown, and maybe we'll take our chances in the playoffs. See what can happen there. So I
Yep.
think that this could be a situation where the Royals do finish the offseason in the top half of free agent spending, maybe even the top 10. That might end up being like 11 or 12. So I think top 10 is probably stretching it, but not by much.
No.
And I'm looking forward to seeing what their aggressiveness can do on the field.
I do agree with that, Jeremy, because we have to zoom out and look at this from 1,000-foot level. The Royals, for decades now, we can say decades, plural, they have been at league average or below league average in payroll.
Yeah.
And you know what? We can say all we want about the small market team or the small market organization, excuse me, and we can point to the Royals winning 2 pennants and a World Series with a below average payroll. But it's still nice to see them go out and spend some competent money. It seems they're
Yeah.
not going out and making just splashy moves. They're going out and addressing the moves that fans knew that they needed to address this offseason.
Yeah, and we've seen, with Cleveland and Tampa Bay and a couple of others, that you can compete with a low payroll if you're willing to be aggressive in trading your stars, stuff like that. But the Royals didn't have any of those stars. They were
Nope.
kind of building from scratch, and there's kind of been a signal from some of the big media heads that makes me think that the Royals are at least pushing this story, that they realized that with the draft lottery the way it was, they weren't going to be able to just sit back and draft talent in.
Mm-hmm.
So they're going to have to go out and do something else. And I think they made some really savvy free agent moves. I mean, yeah, would I rather, if money were no object, I would rather have Aaron Nola and Jordan Montgomery and Shohei Ohtani and whoever else.
Yeah.
But money is an object for the team. They care about how much they spend, even if I don't. And so I think that they went out. I think I mentioned this last podcast, but considering that this is probably what their budget is, it just is what it is. How else would you have spent this money?
Yeah.
That's my question. Is how else would you have spent the $45 million that they gave Seth Lugo? Some people are like, "Oh, that's an overpay." Where else would you have put $45 million that would get you a better player than Seth Lugo? I would argue it's not there. I also look at, this is a signing that happened while we were kind of between things, over Christmas, or
Oh
no,
yeah.
over New Year's. Lucas Giolito signed 2-year
Yeah.
deal, $38.5 million. Now, let me tell you, Lucas Giolito, not as good as Michael Wacha or Seth Lugo last year. Now,
Not
he
even
is
close.
28. They're both over 30, but he didn't get that much more than they did annual average value. I don't, I'm not convinced that the Royals overpaid for Seth Lugo and Michael Wacha. Because if that's what Lucas Giolito's getting, then that's what the market is.
Yep.
I mean, that's just where the market is when we're looking at all the starting pitchers. That's what they get when they're at that level. So I think that Giolito is comparable, maybe a little bit better than them. But again, he got a little bit more AAV. So,
Mm-hmm.
that just makes sense. So I think the Royals spent their money in a way that makes sense. And again, we've talked about this, and I will keep. This is a point that I think I'm going to just repeat every time I talk about the Royals for the rest of the year. We're in the new year now, so I can say that.
Yep.
For at least the rest of the year till the end of the season, is that Royals may not be good, but they should be at least watchable. Whereas in 2023, they were unwatchably bad.
Yep. Agreed. And you know what? At this point, all I'm asking for is improvement. There is only, well, I wouldn't say there's only room to go up from 106 loss season, because we have seen worse in baseball, but there is a lot more room upwards
Yeah.
to improve in the win-loss column. So we touched on that a good amount in our previous episode, actually, when we talked about Hunter Renfroe and how we expect this team to get better. Matthew Lamar, the Royals Review deputy editor, was on the episode with us as well. Great chat with him. If you want to go back and listen to that, it should be in your podcast feed, including on Apple Podcasts and on Spotify, wherever you get your podcasts from. All right, Jeremy, before we get on to Royals reviews, anything else you want to add or talk about regarding the Royals?
I don't have anything else to add right now. I think I
Okay.
really wanted to cover the Lucas Giolito signing, because I really do think how so I'm just going to hammer that one more time. I really think that's indicative that if the Royals overpaid for Seth Lugo and Michael Wacha, it wasn't much. And even Giolito, I believe, got that same player opt out after the first year. So that's just a thing that's going around the league this year. Teams are trying to hand that out instead of handing out money, which makes a lot of sense for both sides. Because then if the interest rates come down, okay, well, now you can get a better deal because more teams are going to be bidding for your services. So, it's just one of those things. I'll stop talking there.
No, it's fine, because I'm also going to hammer a point not on Giolito, but on Frankie Montas. I don't know if you recognize that name. He was another free agent starter who he pitched, I want to say, like 2 innings out of the bullpen last year.
Yeah, it was
for
not
the
much.
New York Yankees. Yeah, it was maybe a handful at that, and he was expected to be a good part of the rotation, but shoulder injuries kind of kept him out of the rotation.
1 1/3 innings out of the bullpen last year.
I'm sorry, how many?
1 1/3.
1 1/3. Okay, I was trying to round up to 2 there. Apparently, thank you, Jeremy.
He appeared in 2 innings.
Oof, yeah, that's true. But even he got like comparable money to Lucas Giolito, if I recall correctly. He got a 2-year deal with the player option, or excuse me, a mutual option worth $20 million. And it was crazy to me to see that number, and from a team who should be making moves to contend in the New York Yankees, making a move like that instead of just going out and buying a Jordan Montgomery or a Blake Snell, perhaps, who's still on the open market. Jeremy, I heard you typing over there. What you got?
Yeah. So 1 year, $16 million deal. And I think you mentioned that mutual option with a $2 billion buyout. So really it's an $18 million deal. They're just spreading that money out a little bit. Yeah. Would I rather have Frankie Montas for $18 million or Michael Wacha for $16 or Seth Lugo for $15? I know which one I prefer at this point right now.
Yeah, me too. So, of course, we'll see how these moves work out once opening day comes. We'll get a little glimpse at it in spring training, see how the Royals are performing on the diamond. We're just trying to keep you interested and informed on the Kansas City Royals for the time being. But let's go ahead and start wrapping up the podcast here, and let's get to our Royals reviews. So, Jeremy, I will start us off this evening just to knock this out real quick. It's a little bit of an older book. It's from 2020, and I don't think I've done a review on it yet, but I do want to suggest you go out and by A Fan's Guide to Baseball Analytics by Anthony Kastrovich. Anthony is a MLB.com columnist, been there since 2004. He has been there for a long, long time. And what he does in this book is he takes individual stats and says, hey, this is how this fits into modern baseball, and this is how it works. And then he also takes other stats and says, hey, look, this is how this came about, but this is why it shouldn't factor in to modern baseball as much. So, for example, I just read the chapter today about the saves and how save came about to try to differentiate between a normal win and a late inning save. And he talked about, okay, that's gotten a little bit construed now. This is why you shouldn't put too much weight into a save, and he tied it back to the Royals of all things, talking about how Greg Holland won the Reliever of the Year award over Wade Davis in a year where Wade Davis was markedly better than Greg Holland, but Holland just got more saves and was pretty elite in his own right. So a very digestible book. It's about 240 pages long. I get it. Easy to read, though. Goes over a ton of different analytics, and surprisingly, it's not number heavy. So please go check that out. Go give it a read, and I feel a little bit smarter walking away from it. Jeremy, what you got for a review, man?
I'm not going to make anybody smarter. I am going to help them have some fun with a video game that that people are really sleeping on. They're sleeping hard on this game. Are you ready? Marvel's Midnight Suns. This is a game that came out late 2023, so it was kind of buried in the holidays, and it kind of got a curse of like, the Marvel, what's it called? Where people are tired of Marvel, and it kind of got the curse of the Marvel's Avengers had come out from Crystal Dynamics on all the platforms, and it was live service, and it shouldn't have been live service, and it wasn't very good. Like, it was very good as a single player, but once you got to the live service in-game stuff, there just wasn't anything to do. It was boring, and it kind of soured a lot of people. In fact, Guardians of the Galaxy video game had a similar problem where it came out, and people thought, oh, well, this must be another live service Marvel game, movie tie-in, and it's not going to be any good. And the thing about all three of these games I mentioned is that none of them are movie tie-ins. These are all comic tie-ins. The Avengers game is based on comic versions of those characters, not the MCU versions. Guardians of the Galaxy, same thing. And then, and in Midnight Suns' case, it's based on a comic series called Midnight Suns, but also a group of heroes called Midnight Suns. And Guardians of the Galaxy was very good. This game, I've been obsessed with it. Okay? It took me about 2 hours. I'm sorry, this is going to be a long one. It took me about 2 hours to get through the tutorials where the game was just trying to make me think that it was going to be as boring as humanly possible. But then once I got through the tutorials, I was introduced to Superlink, which is basically superhero Facebook for all of the superheroes that you're gathering for your team. And they'll make these goofy posts and snark back and forth at each other. And it's so amazing. And one of the things that you could see in games like Guardians of the Galaxy, even in Avengers and in Midnight Suns, is an opportunity to really explore the people, the characters, instead of just like, oh, we fight hard, or, all the traumatic events. You get to see them like interact with each other. Persona is a series that's known for its player interactions with the non-player characters and the deep relationships you can build there. It could take some lessons from Midnight Suns on how to really build relationships and on how to make it seem like these characters interact with each other outside of the protagonist. It is just, I have had so much fun with this game. It's got a really tight loop once you get through that tutorial that makes it easy to just go one more thing. The first night I played it, after I got through the tutorial, I one more thing to my way to 3 a.m. I was very glad I did not have work the next day. It was just, it's just so much fun. And I do at this point have to warn you, it is kind of buggy because it
Mhm.
didn't get a lot of sales, it didn't get great reviews, so they cut support for it. And there's one bug in particular that drives me absolutely up the wall, where one of the best armor sets in the game, you can literally not acquire because they bugged the chest that you're supposed to get it from. So you can't get it unless you are a player on PC, and then you can download a mod that will put it in a different chest. So
Yeah.
that is kind of a bummer. But what that means to me is that this game, this developer needs a second chance. This needs a sequel to really just expand on the things that are good and clean up the things that are bad. And I
Mhm.
desperately need this game to have that sequel and to see what that could look like. So I need you all to go out and buy this game on whatever platform you want to play it on. Go out and get it. It's on Switch, it's on PlayStation, it's on Xbox, it's on PC, it's Steam Deck. Whatever you want to do, go out, buy this game, show it some love because it needs a sequel. And even with the bugs, there is a lot to love here. And I really hope people will go out and find a way to love this game like I have.
Yeah, certainly hope so, man. That's a hell of a glowing review, especially looking at it's not really a game I would assume you would play if you know what I mean. It's not an IP that I would assume you would
Yeah,
invest
I
in. You
am
know what
a
I mean?
I am a huge Marvel mark. So I
Okay.
had my eye on it for a while, but I wasn't sure about it. And then it got all those bad reviews, and I wasn't sure about it. And then one of my friends played it, and he was like, "No, this game is legit." And so I was like, "All right,
Okay.
I'll give it a try." And like I said, for those first couple hours, I was like, "I do not know about this, man. I don't know about this at all." And then I got through the tutorial areas, and like things started to open up. You can explore. It's got some tactical turn-based combat. So think
Ooh.
it's from the developers of XCOM. So if you're an XCOM fan,
Okay.
it's that gameplay. Final Fantasy Tactics is something else that I think of as a game I've played that I enjoyed. Obviously, this is 3D instead of isometric, but there's so much good stuff here. The system is really, really deep and really broad, and it's not hard to understand, but it is difficult to master, which I think is the sweet spot for video game gameplay. Is like you
Mhm.
want to have that, and it's you. You can adjust the difficulty at any time outside of a battle. So you're like, oh, this is a little bit too hard. You can turn it down. Oh, this is a little bit easy. You can turn it up. And then if you're like, oh no, it got hard again, you turn it back down. And that's all fine. It just affects your rewards. You can still earn all your trophies or achievements at any difficulty, including the story level difficulty, which is like where the enemies barely know what they're doing. Um,
Oh dang.
yeah, so there's a lot of options and variety and versatility here. And one of the really cool things is that it's one of my favorite things that you'll see with Marvel video games is expanding on characters that haven't been made huge in the MCU yet. So like I
Yes.
played Avengers, and Miss Marvel was the hero of that game before the Miss Marvel TV series had come out, and I fell in love with Miss Marvel, the character, from playing that game. I was like, I didn't know who you were. You're really cool. I like you. I want to hang out with you more. Now, obviously, Iron Man, Hulk, Doctor Strange, these big name guys, Captain America, they show up in all these games. But there's more here too. In Midnight Suns, you've got Magic, who's a Russian X-Man related to Colossus. For those of you who are not quite as familiar, you've seen him in the Deadpool movies at least.
Yeah.
Um, it's got Wolverine interacting with Captain America and Iron Man in a way that you haven't seen for a long time outside of the comics. It's got some DLC characters. They added Deadpool, Venom, Morbius, and Storm.
Ooh.
Blade is here
Like
for the
it.
first time in a while. Haven't seen him for a while. Just a lot of fun, a lot of really cool interactions, and like I said, there's you can hang out with people at night, and you're like, oh, I'm going to play some video games with Spider-Man over here, and that's going to be a good time. But also,
Yeah.
Blade is going to start a book club, and you can go do a book club with Blade, Captain Marvel, and Captain America, and just be like, yeah, this is a good time too.
Okay.
there's a lot of good stuff going on there, and a lot of heroes that you may not have heard of or you may not know very well that you can spend some time with and get to know, and even the characters that you are familiar with, you're going to get different versions of them. Like this Iron Man is a little bit more egotistical and definitely a real alcoholic, so you've got to deal with that kind of stuff happening in your game. Not like, oh no, he's an alcoholic, this is downer, but like he's like, oh yeah, I don't go near the bar, it's fine. So that it addresses a lot of stuff, and like I said, a lot of really interesting character interactions that you just aren't going to get in the movies because the movies are too busy being quip, explosion, special effect.
Very true.
And those are fun, don't get me wrong. Like I said, I'm a huge Marvel mark.
They are.
But it's fun to really kind of dive in and see what these characters can do when they interact with each other as well.
Very true. All right, man. Hey, thanks for your thanks for the review. I do appreciate it. One more thing before we get on out of here that I failed to talk about. So I did plug that you can participate in our Q&As and our polls on Spotify. I talked about the Q&As, but I did want to bring up the poll, especially since it had a lot to do with our last episode. So in the poll, Jeremy, we asked, well, Matt raised the bar for how much the Royals will improve. So let's reset. How many wins will Kansas City improve by in 2024? And I gave him 3 options, and I want to get your thoughts on which option was the leader. I gave options for 13 to 16 wins, 16 to 20 wins, and 20 plus. Which do you think was the most picked?
16 to 20.
Okay, well, it was a trick question because it was a tie between 13 to 16 and 16 to 20. So between those two, it was 83.4% of respondents picked one of those 2 options. So that's a pretty good improvement. If you do ask me, I would be very happy to see a 20 win improvement. Could you imagine that? 76 wins.
No, a 20 win improvement would be what? They'd win 76 games.
Yep.
They'd be right there in the playoff hunt in September again, based on how bad AL Central is. That would be fun. I would enjoy that. I would like to do that. Let's do that.
Yes, I would.
Improve by 20, 25, 27, 28 wins, win the division.
Yeah. Why not? Might as well. Might as well go for it all, I guess. All right, y'all. Hey, like I said, you can, if you're listening to this, you know where to find us. But if you want us to actually hear your voice, you got to go over to Spotify where you can respond to our Q&As and polls over there. And we will, even with our special guests, we will read your responses to the Q&As on air. So we always appreciate hearing from you, our listeners, and just talking Royals baseball and just seeing what we could do to make the podcast better. Another good way to get a hold of us is on X at Royal Rundown Pod. You can find us there. And plus, our links are in the podcast description below. Jeremy, anything else before we get on out of here?
Have you? Did you buy Midnight Suns yet? Go do it.
No, I've not bought Midnight. I have been sitting here the whole time.
What are you waiting for? I spent like 10 minutes talking about the game. Go buy it.
I could have probably downloaded half the game by now.
Yes.
If I had gone and gotten that. So
I'm
you know
ashamed
what?
that you have not. You failed me.
Shame on me. Shame on me. Well, hey, everyone out there who's still listening, thank you. Thank you so much for your support. And we can't wait to hear from you next time. And until next time, go Royals.